Hello everybody. This is a 10-minute segment about paradigm shift for the 21st century. I want to try to indicate why we human beings on planet Earth need to be thinking in terms of a fundamental paradigm shift for the 21st century. We live in a world that is fragmented. Right? You can see from the video a fragmented world, a sovereign militarized nation states, and a fragmented world that is basically economic chaos, with many economic enterprises going at their own speed for their own self-interest and not thinking about the good of the whole. But in the 21st century, we now understand that we are a whole. And let's talk a little bit more about that. The environment, everybody's talking about the environment. The environment is collapsing all around us. It is being polluted, it's being destroyed, and the question is why? Is it just human beings? Is it just our lack of care? Or is it the system itself that is interfering with our ability to do what we know is scientifically necessary? Let's take a look at this graph here. This comes from NASA. It's a standard graph, quite famous, and you can see that at the right-hand side of the graph, it goes off the chart. And this is true if you look at graphs of the melting of the ice caps, if you look at graphs about the droughts, the increase in droughts worldwide, about wildfires, freshwater shortages, pollution, the population of the earth, everybody on the earth needing more and more resources, deforestation. All the graphs show the same pattern, very similar pattern. They're off the charts in the last 50 years or so. And they continue to be off the charts, putting the earth in this future in terrible peril. The same problem exists with the system of sovereign nation states. It's a war system. Philosophers from the time of Thomas Hobbes right through John Locke, right through Hegel in the 19th century have made that point, that the system that many scholars say was created in 1648 at the Peace of Westphalia in Europe, which defined sovereignty, defined a nation that has a powerful government over its internal affairs and is independent in its foreign affairs, its external affairs. This system is inherently a war system. And the violence increases, the violence exacerbates, terrorism is in response, recrimination, chaos. We live in a world that is not unified and is incapable of addressing these global crises that we're facing in the 21st century. Here's a depiction of this world system that these philosophers have called a war system. And you can see these circles represent the sovereign nations, but each sovereign nation has completely independent relationships with 192 other sovereign nations. So they might treat one nation a certain way, another nation another way. They might have a military power toward one nation. They might be economic sanctions or trade war with other nations. It's a system that is in chaos. And this diagram represents that chaos. This is a map of our planet as we often see it. It's a map of colored segments. So we look at each continent and we see that each continent is divided into subsections that we call nations, given on the map a different color. Is that the reality of the world? Does it show the deep truth about our world? All these nations, some 193 of them, together spend 1.8 trillion US dollars a year on military and militarism and war. 1.8 trillion US dollars that could and should be used to eliminate poverty, to create a decent environment for everybody living on the planet, and to address the declining, collapsing environment that all scientists are talking about, the danger for our future because of this collapsing environment. Now, look at this next picture of the Earth. This is a picture that we've only seen in the last 50 years. We've only seen since 1960s or so, when they began to send these rocket ships up into space and get pictures of the Earth. Look at it. A tiny little planet, a sphere on which all of us live, floating in space, no boundaries, no divisions, a world which is one small planet, one humanity, one civilization. And this is the foundation for that paradigm shift. Unless we begin thinking that we are one humanity, one planet, and one civilization, we don't have a future on this planet. We have to overcome the fragmentation of the political system of sovereign nation states, the fragmentation of the global economic system, and unite together with a future in which we all understand that we are all human beings, citizens living on this planet, world citizens all. Scholars have discovered that there is some version of the golden rule in every culture, in every religion on Earth since the time of the axial period, some 2,500 years ago. We all know this golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The New Testament version of that comes from Jesus, is love your neighbor as yourself. If I love myself, I want good to be done to myself. If I love my neighbor, I want to do good to my neighbor. We all know this reciprocity principle that is fundamental to all human relationships in every religion on earth. So the question is, if we all know this, why is it not happening in the world? Why is the world so full of violence, of hatred, of fear, terrorism, war? And the answer is that we have to look deeper. It's not merely personal, it's also structural. Right? In this image, we see that personal change is important. People work on spiritual awakening, on ethical principles, and so on. Social change is also important. Right? People work on changing their local culture, the way they do things, the way people relate to one another. But very few people realize that the fundamental problem is system change. System change. We're not thinking yet in terms of a system change for the earth. A change from this outmoded war system of militarized sovereign nation states. A change from this economic system of competing multinational corporations concerned with the bottom line of profit and not the good of the whole. We need a paradigm shift from fragmentation to holism. The system is outdated and it is in danger of killing us, of destroying our possible future on this planet. The paradigm transformation for all that I'm talking about here is embodied in this single document called the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. This document was created by hundreds of world citizens working together before I got involved with this movement. They worked between 1968 and 1991, and they met in 4 giant constituent assemblies beginning in 1968, and in these assemblies and through constant interaction over these 23 years, they produced this brilliant document called the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. In Troia, Portugal, the last meeting in 1991, they decided it was finished, it was ready for ratification. It's not just an ideal, it's not just a draft, it's something the world can focus on if it wants to really embody the paradigm shift that is necessary for human survival and for a future on this planet. So the Constitution is a parliamentary system. It sets up a parliament for the planet, a world parliament. And this parliament has three houses: a House of Peoples, elected from 1,000 electoral districts around the world; a House of Nations, 1, 2, or 3 representatives from each nation in the world, depending on its population. So a small nation, Haiti, for example, would have 1 representative. Big nations like India or China or the United States would have 3 representatives in the House of Nations. And then there's a third house, a brilliant aspect of this Constitution. It's called the House of Counselors. People selected in a certain way in order to have wise people, in order to have highly educated and thoughtful people as part of the World Parliament. So these 3 houses together will be legislating enforceable world law, enforceable for all the citizens of the planet, that is predicated on solving our most fundamental global problems that are beyond the scope of nations. The nations are still there. They can deal with their internal problems, but our global problems, the problem of climate collapse, the problem of war, the problem of global poverty and misery, these are things that the World Parliament will be concerned with. So you can see in the diagram, the 3 houses are the ultimate body in this system, and underneath it you have the World Judiciary, the World Executive, the World Police, and the World Ombudsman. The Ombudsman, a whole department worldwide dedicated to protecting human rights and being sure that the Constitution is not abused in any way by any of the other agencies. It's a brilliant system, and I urge you to study it, to think about it, to discuss it. It needs to get out there because it embodies in a very simple way, in a fairly short document, the paradigm shift that we need to make if we want a future on this planet. So the Earth Constitution transforms the world from fragmentation, the fragmentation that's now institutionalized in our global political system of militarized sovereign nation states and our global economic system of competing giant corporations looking for profit and self-interest. It transforms that to holism under the principle of unity in diversity. We can respect the diversity. We can respect the different races, religions, cultures, attitudes of people throughout the world only if we're really united, if we really understand that we're one civilization and one people. So it ends war. That's part of the mandate in Article 1 of the Constitution. Ends war and disarms the nation. It uses the global economy to fight climate change and establish a sustainable economy for the earth. It diminishes social differences and addresses global poverty, and it protects the common good of the earth and future generations. This is the function of the Earth Constitution, brilliantly embodied, as I said, in the way it's designed. Study it, think about it, look at it. So it's our world, our planet, our future. You can see in this slide. Unless we love it, unless we really love the planet, really love the possibility of a decent future, we're not going to have a future. I mean, it's as simple as that. We need to affirm the unity and diversity of our people and nations and civilizations and languages. We need to unite to protect this, to protect our planet and its future. So this is the paradigm shift that we are talking about, the paradigm shift to the Earth Constitution, one humanity, one planet, one world civilization. And these on this last slides are some of the websites, the fundamental websites where the Constitution can be found, and that talks about this work and this worldwide movement that has been taking place since 1958, 1968. It's a worldwide movement of people who have united to write this Constitution and now are working to have it ratified and studied by the people and nations of the earth. Thank you for your attention.
La Federación de la Tierra y el Parlamento Mundial.